Yes. Surrender. Leave the green hills. I'm not afraid that there will be no firewood. Zin on the phone also gave a long sigh and said to Ruoli, Ruoli, surrender. I will do everything possible to mediate with the Japanese side, and I will rescue you anyway. The string in Ruoli's mind was finally loosened. Although she was still unwilling, she nodded and said, Patriarch, I know. You take care. If you can't, serving you is in control. Zin was heartbroken, but he could only speak, trust me, I will definitely save you. Well, I believe it. Ruoli said angrily, then hung up the phone and said to the flight attendant, Okay, open the hatch. The flight attendant nodded immediately and opened the 4 front and rear hatches one after another. Afterwards, they heard people shouting outside. Everyone put your hands on top of your heads and line up to walk down the spiral staircase. Anyone who dares to play tricks will be killed on the spot. Ruoli sighed, stood up, and said to everyone with a sad expression, It is also fate for everyone to work together. I hope you can take care of yourself. After speaking, she raised her hands above her head, and stepped out of the hatch first. Outside the cabin, the helicopter kept roaring overhead, and the huge wind blew Ruoli's long hair and clothes. Countless guns were pointed at her below, and someone shouted, Come down slowly, put your hands on your head and let us see. Ruoli could only do so. The moment she stepped down the spiral staircase, she was also flustered for her unknown future. Because she didn't know what the end of waiting for herself was. After all, she is the principal culprit. After being arrested, others will definitely confess her identity as the principal culprit. If nothing else, the death penalty must be waiting for her. Unless Zin can really save her, she will undoubtedly die. When she stepped down the spiral staircase, several heavily armed self-defense team members rushed up and pressed her to the ground, then put her hands behind her back, and handcuffed her in handcuffs. Immediately afterwards, the remaining 50 or so people stepped off the plane one after another. All of them were handcuffed back and squatting on the ground, the heads of the assault rifles against the back of the head. Even the crew members were not spared, they were all caught by their accomplices. Charlie stood in the cockpit of the plane behind, sneer in his heart as he watched the Sue family get swept away. These 50-odd people are the claws and fangs of the Sue family. Now that they are all in the hands of the Japanese government, the Sue family's vitality is greatly injured. Sue family, I, Charlie, will definitely let you pay the price for the anti-Wade alliance back then. After all the members of the Sue family plane were under control, the Japanese self-defense forces began to clear the ground and gradually restore order at the airport. They first drove over 3 buses with steel protective nets welded to their windows, so that everyone including Ruoli, under the watch of the self-defense team, boarded one by one. In order to prevent these people from escaping as much as possible, the Japanese self-defense forces put 2 sets of handcuffs on everyone. Besides, they also handcuffed them. Not only that, but they also scattered these people and guarded them one-on-one. The seat division on the bus has 2 seats on each side. Therefore, every Sue family in handcuffs was arranged to sit by the window, and then a self-defense team with live ammunition sat next to them to prevent them from having any chance to escape. In addition, 10 self-defense personnel armed with live ammunition were arranged in the corridor of the bus to guard all suspects in the vehicle. If there is any change, they will be shot and killed immediately. Ruoli was leaning against the window with her face like ashes, looking out the window through the steel protective net. The airport at this time was brightly lit. For Ruoli, she should have taken off by plane and headed back home, but she never dreamed that she would become a prisoner. She still couldn't figure out which link went wrong. But she knew that she could not escape this time. After a while, all of the Sue family's men were escorted into the bus by the self-defense team. As a result, the 3 buses started slowly under the escort of 10 wheeled armored vehicles, ready to leave the airport. In order to ensure that there are no accidents to the greatest extent, the Japanese Homeland Security Department plans to relocate all the more than 50 people from the Sue family to the Japanese Self-Defense Forces station in Osaka. There are tens of thousands of soldiers guarding them, and no one can rescue them from there. When the bus drove away from the scene, it happened to pass by the plane that Charlie was on behind. The Gulfstream plane Charlie took was a small plane with about 10 seats, and the fuselage was not too high. and Ruoli was sitting on the bus, further shortening the height difference between the two. When passing by this Gulfstream plane, Ruoli looked at the plane's cockpit, just like looking at the cab of an off-road vehicle from an ordinary car. Leaning against the window of the car, she was so desperate. She suddenly caught a glimpse of a man who was somewhat familiar standing in the cockpit of a Gulfstream plane passing by. She glanced at it, angrily almost exploded on the spot.